I'm very pleased to be joined today by Paul Jordan from Winning with Webinars. Hello, Paul.
Hi, Liz. Thanks for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be here.
No, lovely to chat to you. So tell me a bit about your background and how you got into doing webinars and funnels for your clients.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, I suppose, my career started off in electronic engineering. Then I worked in IT, software, project management, that kind of stuff. I got into internet marketing about 4 years ago. And about a year or so ago, I was approached. It's always interesting in life how buses come in threes, so to speak. But I was approached
Mhm.
by, I think it was about 7 or 8 different coaches in a short space of time. And all of these people wanted to do webinars because they realized there's a lot of benefit to be had in running a webinar, getting in front of a bigger audience and having the opportunity to interact. But a lot of them got stuck with the technology. They find, they sit down with the intention of creating a webinar, but to do them properly, they realize, oh my goodness, I've actually got to do an email sequence. I've got to do this landing page thing. I've got to do the slides. I've got to do dot, 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 dot.
Mm.
Um, So there was a real variety of coaches. There was a weight loss coach, a relationship coach. So I took this as a message from the universe to think, okay, there are lots of people out there that want to run webinars, but don't know how to do them or put together a package. So that's how I came about to create the Winning with Webinars course to teach people how to set up their own webinars.
And so how many people have you had through the course and what kind of webinars have they been creating?
Yeah, well, so far there's been I think it's been about 8 people. It's still fairly early days. Um, a real variety of, it's all been coaches, interestingly enough. So there's a lifestyle coach, so males and females. And it's very interesting as well, because as we were saying earlier, that the great thing about the internet is you can reach people across the globe. And I've had, there's a transformation coach called Dell. She's in Germany. I've got a relationship coach who's based in Ireland. Um, I've got a lifestyle coach who's in the UK, but most of my clients so far have been abroad, which has been quite interesting. So, because coaching is such a huge industry, um, and people realize that, there's a lot more to a webinar than just getting in front of a camera like we are now, but they're trying to sort of present an offer, they present a solution to a problem, and then monetize it. They're trying to get people to either book a call or purchase something at the end. So there's quite a lot of moving parts to the technology. And I think that's where people stumble. They're quite good at putting the presentation together, but then they get stuck with the technology, which is where my course comes in. But there's also the other thing about a webinar, of course, is if people are trying to sell their offer, uh, a coaching program or a training course or something like that, people are very good at talking about their own subject matter. But I find a lot of coaches and so forth, they're not actually very good at selling, and they find the whole
Mm.
thing about money quite vulgar. So I also help to teach them about how to structure their subject matter, but weave in a few little sales things, so that when they come to make their offer at the end of the webinar, people are more primed to buy it, hopefully.
Yeah. And so who are the people that should be using webinars? I mean, I've been on a number of these kinds of things. But yeah, who do they work well for?
Gosh, yeah. Well, it's from a sales perspective, there are so many different types of. I mean, I've seen them being used for selling solar panels. I've been to. They're like they can be used for a physical product presentation.
Mm.
But I decided to work with coaches who are delivering a service. So although they work well for a whole variety of people, I specialize in helping service providers such as coaches, therapists, those kinds of people where what they're selling is actually their service directly. They're not selling a product; they're actually selling themselves. In It might be somebody who's teaching someone how to give up smoking, or how to lose weight, or how to start a business, some life coaching, that kind of thing. So they work really well, because some of these people have one-to-one calls with their prospects, and then the prospect doesn't call back, or they don't. And a lot of coaches are very bad at doing a follow-up call. They'll have
Mhm.
an introductory free consultation, but then they don't follow up. And if they're doing that a few times a week, that's very inefficient use of time. Whereas if you can get 20 people together at the same time and talk to them on a webinar, you're talking to 20 prospects at the same time, which is much more efficient than talking to one. So that's where they can work very well.
Yeah. So how easy do people find it once they've been on your course to put their webinar together? Is it less complicated than they thought once they actually get down to it?
Um, I'm not sure if they find it less complicated, but I think they find it less overwhelming because I kind of break it down into steps. And I think a lot of people, when they first sit down, they don't, because they do get overwhelmed with all the different components, they don't know where to start. They kind of go around in circles. And in fact, it's very interesting. I've got some good testimonials, and the word overwhelm comes up
Mm.
several times for everybody. And procrastination, because they hit that brick wall of, oh my God, I'm not quite sure what to do. They procrastinate. I've got one lady, the lady in Germany, it took her 2 years before she worked with me to get her webinars up and running. I think it's like any big problem, isn't it? When you break it down into small parts, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Mhm.
So with my program, it's very well structured. It's very linear, and I've got a checklist with all the different parts, like do this, do this, do this, do this. And I think when people have got a very clear plan and also an expectation of a timescale, because I think people sit down and expect to just build a webinar in a couple of hours, where it takes a lot more time to do that. So I think when
Mm.
people have got a clear plan of tasks that they can tick off, you break it down to very small manageable pieces and set them a timescale according to how much time they have available each week. It makes it much more digestible. So whilst it doesn't remove the complexity, it dilutes it. So it makes it,
Mm.
by focusing on just one thing at a time rather than got to do all of these different things, you can just focus on one thing, tick it off, do the next, do the next. Because a lot of the tasks are one-off tasks. Once it's done, you can
Yeah.
forget. But the thing that I really encourage people, the very first thing that we do on the program is to forget all the technology, but to get people to stand in front of a mirror or a camera with a book that's not necessarily related to their subject, and just start talking for 15 minutes a day, just to get used to hearing their own voice, because that's quite cool.
Yeah. I mean, so many people say to me, "Oh, I hate hearing my sound of my own voice when I hear it recorded." Do people say that to you as well?
It's a real classic problem, isn't it? And as you're an expert, and because we hear ourselves through our jawbone and the vibrations, it's very different to hearing it
Mm.
through the airwaves. Um, so that's a very common people. But also the other interesting thing, Liz, is that people don't like seeing themselves on video. And
No.
there's another interesting factor, so as well as the audible side, which we've just covered, something that I learned, which is really interesting. People dislike themselves on video, but there's a really good reason for it. And that, I find this quite fascinating. We all see ourselves in the mirror
Yeah.
thousands of times throughout our life, don't we? Brushing our teeth, having a shave, putting on the makeup, or whatever. So we're familiar with that face in the mirror. We've seen it thousands and thousands of times, but it's not how other people see us.
No.
So when we see a recording of ourselves, we're seeing ourselves, and our faces are asymmetric. We're not symmetric. So when we see ourselves on camera, our logical mind is saying, yeah, that's me. No, that's Paul. That's Liz. I know who that person is. But our subconscious knows that that's not quite right. There's something not
Yeah.
that, we don't know what it is. But the way the subconscious communicates that to us is through making us feel uncomfortable. It's a sense of discomfort. We don't quite understand why. But the reason is because when we see ourselves on video, that's an unfamiliar face. We know
Mm.
that, but we're seeing ourselves the other way around. And we very rarely do that. So the mirror image is what we're used to and familiar with. So when we see the real face the right way around, it creates a bit of strangeness to us. But when we get used to
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, I spend all day, every day listening to my own voice, so I'm used to. Oh, dear. So do you ever do the process for people, or are you just the guide that takes them through the process?
Good question indeed. Yes, we do. And I found with the different clients so far, if I look at the client in Germany, she was very technically competent and she was really happy to take on board all of the tasks when she went through the program. So she did everything. Other people are less happy to do all the tasks. They're very good at doing their slides, and obviously they have to speak, so we can't do that for them. But things like setting up an email sequence or setting up a landing page, sometimes they don't want to do that, or they struggle with the tech side. So yes, we can do that for them. We can actually build the whole system so that all they have to do is stand up and talk on the day.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to anyone who's thinking of creating a webinar?
I think best advice is just take action. I think there's a lot of mindset with a lot of things in life, and I think webinars are one. Because people don't know where to start, as I was probably alluding to earlier, the best thing to do is, even before you've even thought about putting the webinar together, just get used to speaking, just stand up and speak, because a lot of people are, they're quite afraid of their own voice, that they're in the house on their own, there's nobody around, and they still feel quite uncomfortable to speak
Mhm.
out loud because it's not a familiar experience to them. So the very first thing is to start speaking, get your voice good, intonation. They create your slides. That's the sort of first thing to do. Get your subject prepared, because the technology is just the framework to put it all together. So that's how I would suggest getting started.
Yeah. And I mean, we've talked about some of the reasons why people might want to have a webinar. Once they've done one, do they often then want to do another one? And should they do another one?
Absolutely. Well, on my program, tell my clients to do a webinar every week. Um, there's a lot of reasons for that. And if you do a webinar every week, more people are going to get in front of you, which is what you're ultimately
Mm.
wanting to do. Secondly, as we know, when you do things repeatedly, it's a form of practice and rehearsal.
Yeah.
You're going to get better and better and more confident as you do it. But the end game really is, with a webinar, is to have an automated webinar. So you do it live for the first time, it's recorded. Then you set it up on what's called an evergreen webinar funnel. So it's all automated. But the thing about a webinar is it's much more than just standing in front of the camera and talking to an audience with a set of slides. A full webinar, well, I like to talk in terms of a webinar funnel, because ultimately you're going to be sending adverts on maybe Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube. You're going to be advertising your product or service, bringing people to your registration page, delivering the webinar through a recording. But the great thing about the webinar is that you're capturing an email address, and then you can
Mm.
email those people with a follow-up sequence, so you can stay in touch. So even if people don't buy something on the day, with the follow-up sequence, you can encourage people to come back, to look at your content, give them some more value, and that builds up the trust and authority. And and the majority of people don't buy on the day of the webinar. They will buy tomorrow or next week, next month. So if you stay in touch with those people, there's a very good chance that they'll come back in the future, because everyone buys at a different time. They're not always ready.
Yeah. Yeah. It's all about building the trust, isn't it? And getting people to see you as the expert in your field.
That's also very much part of it. I think generally in the internet world, it's reckoned that people have to have about 7 touch points. And by touch points is like receiving the email, watching a video, reading a social media post. Those are all called touch points. And it's reckoned that when people have had 7 or 8 touch points with you, that you had this thing called kind of know, like, and trust. If you think of
Mhm.
every time you have an interaction, your balance of know, like, and trust goes up and up and up. And the great thing about a webinar is, in that, during the course of an hour, where people interact with you, they can ask you questions, they can see you, they can hear your voice, they can decide if they like your personality, if they don't like your personality. So a webinar is very, very powerful at escalating that know, like, and trust to a very high level in a short space of time. So it's very
Mm.
doing
Yeah. So what kind of results are people that have worked with you seeing?
very different. I suppose it also depends on their sales process, because some people, what they're wanting to do at the end of the webinar is to get people to book a call.
Mm.
So at the end of the webinar, they'll present a calendar where people can click on a date, select a time, and have a phone call. And then that coach will have the phone call with the prospective client, decide if they want to work with them, and then book them in for whatever it is that they do, take a card payment over the phone or however they wish to do it. So they'll actually close the sale, if you like, during a phone call. So
Mhm.
that's how some of my coaches like to work. But with other ones, they're leading towards filling up their calendar, but then running an automated webinar. And I know this is not such a direct answer to your question here, but the ones that have now got a very busy calendar, they think, well, where can they go next? So they're getting the success of the webinars to fill up their appointment slots. But where do they go next? And so what we teach them is to say, well, the next thing for you to do is to build a course. Because once you've got a course for what you do, you can still carry on doing your live calls and spending your time during the week speaking to people and helping them. But if you've got a course and you can productize your knowledge and your expertise, you can sell that indefinitely, and that doesn't take up your time. So that's the sort of next step after they've filled the calendar through running webinars. The next step is to encourage people to create some kind of course that they can.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, I've loved learning all about webinars and how we should be doing them. So if people want to know more about you, Paul, or your Winning with Webinars program, what is the best place for them to find you?
Sure. Well, hopefully there'll be a call to action link for my calendar. So if people want to book a call, I'll be very happy to have a no obligation call with people. Just have a chat, friendly chat, not a sales call. But also if they Google Paul Jordan webinars, they'll find I come up in quite a few places on Google, which is good. So they can see my social media listings. But the calendar is the best way to get in touch, really.
Lovely. Well, thank you for being my guest this morning, Paul.
Pleasure. It's been really good fun, Liz. So thank you for inviting me, and look forward to speaking again.
Bye.
Bye for now. Cool. Well, I'm glad I stopped talking. As my voice is I can feel a tickle. Feel a tickle just arising there. Gosh. Well, that was good. I'm feeling kind of hyped up. Like that sort of adrenaline. I think it's really like I feel like I've had like 10 coffees and I haven't.
It's the power of live television, isn't it? That's what
Yeah,
it is.